And here we are. The end. The end of our rated PC for pre-code special series. What a journey this has been to explore these 30s, early 30s, mid 30s films. Has been a lot of fun. And tonight may not have been fun for some, but it'll definitely, I think, be an interesting discussion.
It really wasn't fun for that poor little girl.
Yeah, as we talk 1931's Night Nurse. Yes, this is definitely a pre-code film. It is our last one of the evening, of the year, as we wind down the year here. Directed by William A. Wellman, and I have a wonderful crew with me who have been here pretty much for at least every pre-code movie we've done. Pretty much either one or both of these fine gentlemen have joined me and been very kind to pop into the spoiler room still. And we have them here tonight. We have Mr. Joe Randazzo, the man, the myth, the legend himself. How you doing, Joe?
Hey, everyone.
And my right-hand man, he keeps coming back. He keeps coming back, and we are so happy he did. Otherwise, it'd just be, I don't know. I'd be lost. I don't know what I'd be doing.
I'm trying to think. Did I do every single pre-code movie? I thought I might have missed one.
You missed like one, I think, because you were too busy getting bloody with Lloyd Kaufman. So I think
you rescheduled for me.
Oh, that's right. We rescheduled. So
I think I missed something in like May when I was doing the all the school stuff.
Yeah,
usually in May I do the AP exams.
But without both of you fine gentlemen here, I'd just be babbling to myself. So thank you so much for coming down the stairs, pulling up a chair, grabbing your favorite drink. How you doing, Ian?
I'm doing great, and I gotta say, I can't believe it's been a year since we started this little pre-code project. It's flown by, and as with all of your themes, Mark, it's been a tremendous education. So thank you. I wasn't so keen on Night Nurse, but I'm hoping that you guys can help turn me around because it was a weird experience for me.
It is a weird movie.
It's a weird movie because where you start in Night Nurse is not where it ends at all. And I that surprised me in a bit, in a good way at least. I was like, well, I did not expect this. So Joe, Mr. Randazzo, you do that so well. Could you give the synopsis of Night Nurse?
Barbara Stanwyck is Laura Hart, who is trying to become a nurse, even though there's been some gaps in her education. She's basically turned down by the I guess the head nurse of this hospital for like what do you call it, a program where she's going to learn on the job and an internship, but a paid one. She bumps into the chief of staff of the hospital outside, literally bumps into him, and I guess he feels bad, so he helps her get the job. You kind of see the kind of wild goings on of these girls who are kind of dorming there. And one night a guy comes in who has been shot. And in a way, this kind of becomes like the old story we were told as kids about, the lion with the thorn in his paw. He's like, hey, look, I know you're supposed to like report every gunshot wound that comes in here, but, maybe you could help me out and I can help you out down the line. And for whatever reason, she decides she's going to trust him and she's going to not report this. And even when the guy comes over, he goes, hey, that guy looks like he lost a lot of blood. Oh, yeah, he fell down the stairs, like cut open his shoulder, and he's a little drunk. That's why he's kind of stumbling a little bit. She gets positioned along with Joan Blondell, who is was kind of the nurse that's kind of bringing her around it with everything. They get put at this rich widow's home. I guess she's a widow.
Yeah.
And immediately Joan Blondell is like, something is wrong here. Like these kids are being like kind of malnutritioned. Like she's spotting it. And her first night on the job, Laura Hart becomes aware or starts to sense that this is kind of intentional. Like the child is being intentionally starved. She tries to say something, but the and we're not used to this because this is Clark Gable. You're not used to Clark Gable being the scumbag villain in this movie. Clark Gable socks her in the mouth and basically tells her to mind her own fucking business.
Pretty much.
Yeah, basically. She goes to the doctor who was the chief of staff that helped her get into the hospital in the first place. And he says, look, I can't do anything because, I can't, it's not my case. I can't say anything about it.
It's not ethical.
There's all these ethics violations that would be in place. But he tells her, you know what, the best way for you to go about figuring out what's going on is to just stay there yourself and report back to us. It's kind of suspending this. I'm not going to pretend to know what 1930s laws were, but
well, I mean, to kind of interject here, I don't understand the ethics problem if she's working, regardless of the profession, if she's working somewhere and she witnesses abuse, going to tell someone and say, hey, can you help me out, put me in touch with the authorities, or can you do something? I don't see how that's a conflict of ethics at all.
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know much about what the law was like back then, but I can't imagine it was that much different than now, to where, like, if you and I are working together and you see me doing something shady and you go tell somebody, how would that be a negative to you?
Well, or maybe this is, it's a pre-code movie. Maybe this is like pre-ethics laws or something. They hadn't worked it out yet.
I'd have to, we'd have to like look, like maybe there were, because a lot of it was also, you don't want to do this. You don't want to go down this road. Was the way a lot of it was being.
Which makes more sense considering the people that she's getting involved with. But sorry, Joe, I interrupted you.
No, dude, it's all good. I mean, we could start going right into the discussion. The movie's not that long, so
no. No, I mean, you covered quite a bit of the main points, especially, but yeah, that's what
the main thing is. Yeah, she's going to stay on and basically try to figure out what's going on and try to stop them from starving this child to death
before the kid dies. Yeah,
yeah.
What caught me with this, and what I think maybe again, and people, if you've watched this show long enough, and my two fantastic crew members here are used to it. I have an overactive imagination, hills, out of mounds of dirt. But I get the impression that they're trying to convey, because a number of things, that there's this underlying corruption and underlying, like, maybe unlawful gangster force. Now, it's not a gangster film, but something underneath that is keeping, like, the one doctor who everybody insists, oh, he's a fantastic doctor, and he's a piece of shit doctor, but he's a guy who's doing snuff in his office, and he's like, yeah, you don't want to do this, but he says it more sinister, whereas the old veteran doctor, who's the good doctor who got her the jobs, like, you don't really want to get involved because he knows the people that are involved. And I think it's an underlying thing to where we're talking, 90 years almost of a disconnect for culture. Maybe it was more within the regular, narrative in real life or whatever. People kind of understood maybe what they were going for in here that we might be missing, because I had the same questions of, why? But then again, I always got this feeling like there's this underlying threat of someone going to disappear if she actually did.
And that's the thing, is like, I feel like the ethics line is like one slice of bologna too much for the sandwich. It could have just been, hey, these are shady characters. I know you're kind of like living with them and taking care of the kids, and you might see some things that you don't agree with, but unless you want to end up in a cement tomb at the bottom of the Hudson, you'll look the other way, because there are very clearly other people working for these people that are doing just that. So the whole ethics thing, if they fleshed it out and kind of explained why that would be a problem, or if it's something where he thought they could get brought up on some kind of an ethics violation because of X, Y, and Z, then that's interesting. Otherwise, for a modern audience, especially, you're just scratching your head like, what the hell are they talking about?
or if because obviously this family that she's going to care for the child of, obviously she's rich, and they talk about a trust that's there for the kids.
Right.
So maybe they're also politically powerful and they could fuck with us that way, but they never really go into that.
Well,
No, the weird thing is, like, this plot reminded me of The Sixth Sense. Remember
Yes,
it was,
I was thinking the same thing. The little girl that's being poisoned by her stepmom.
yeah, and they just find out the secret video and all that stuff. Yeah, maybe Shyamalan was a big fan of Night Nurse. Who knows? Well, he did.
I mean, this
He
movie
did do
does
that
have good
show
plot.
Awakenings, which took place in the hospital. So
yeah, there you go.
Right.
But
This movie does have a big cult following, so it's very possible that Shyamalan was a fan of this movie.
It has a cult following. Tell me more about that.
It does. It's one of those movies that even before I really got into the pre-code thing, I had heard, oh, okay, if you're going to watch pre-code movies, you have to see Night Nurse. You have to see Night Nurse, and I would hear that from a lot of people, and I don't know how much farther than that it gets, but I'm guessing just in the film community, it seems to have a bit of a cult following because it was one of those movies that I heard immediately, like, oh yeah, Night Nurse, got to go see that one.
But have you? I mean, maybe you don't have an answer to this, but was there a why? Because usually it's like, oh, you got to see this movie; it's really fucked up, or you got to see this movie; it's really sexy, or this is the breakout or something. But like, what was it about Night Nurse that people like? You have to watch this.
I think it just might be the outlandishness of the subject matter, because you have a group of people who are trying to poison a child and a nurse who's trying to. I think it's kind of the fucked up nature of just that in general, and also. Yeah. If you're used to watching like the movies from this era that were after the Hays Code, you're not used to seeing, Barbara Stanwyck and Joan Blondell constantly taking their clothes off. You know, they don't get completely naked.
The first half hour.
Yeah, there's a lot of it the first half hour.
And that's the crazy thing about this movie, or one of the things is, like, you feel like you get so close to them, just they're constantly being interrupted by something from taking off that next layer. It is very, like, sexy in that kind of, like, adolescent kind of way, like, oh, I'm gonna see something, and it's not exactly like perverted, it's just kind of like sensual in a weird way, innocent.
And there's almost like kind of lesbian undertones too.
Oh,
like
yeah,
they like when the first time they get interrupted by the one other guy in the hospital. What they call him? They had a funny nickname for him.
They had different nicknames for him. He got she kept dropping the different nicknames, which I love the dialogue in these. One of the thing with all these 30s films, I have loved the dialogue, because I'm like, they come up with new ways to insult people.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I can't remember. I'm looking at the cast name. Was it Egan, or was that a different
Egan?
guy?
It was
Egan was his name, but it was the first time he comes up on the because Joan Blondell's telling Barbara Stanwyck, oh yeah, change into this, and she's like, what, right here? It's like, yeah, right here. Who cares? And Joan Blondell just leans up against the wall and just like looks at her changing, and I'm like, oh, this is 1931. What is this? And then the guy knocks on the door. Which he could have stayed there silent and just enjoyed his show. I mean, if they really want to paint him as a scumbag,
that would have been like the Psycho remake. You know what I'm talking about, Mark?
Well, you mentioned it last week.
They called him the first time. They called him like baby carrier or baby crier or something. The first time, and then
something where he terrified babies, like baby.
Yeah. Like a baby, go scare the babies, and then they called him a veterinarian. Why don't you go back on the horse you came in? And like it was like just baloney. Joan Blondell was great in this, and
yes,
I love.
God, she's a beautiful woman. Joan Blondell was a very beautiful woman.
This is the first time I remember seeing her. I don't know if she's been other stuff I've seen, but she's strikingly beautiful. And she's also got that sassy best friend kind of thing going on, but you also get the feeling that she is really her own character that we could follow. That's one of the things I kind of lamented about this movie. Not only is the big tonal shift, especially as Nurse Hart gets involved with this family, it becomes more like this serious, like Aaron Brockovich style, we have to take these corrupt people down. but also we lose, Ms. Blondell. Like I want to see these two like partners throughout this wacky screwball hospital comedy for an
That's
hour
the
and
thing.
12
It
minutes.
starts out like that. It starts out like a screwball comedy, and then it becomes super serious. Of oh no, these rich people are trying to murder a child. It is like it's total whiplash.
Yeah, and I will say it's interesting that this is pre-code, because I almost get the feeling that there was some kind of moral code involved in the filming of this film. How many times can I say film in one sentence? But no, there's the scene where I think it's when we first meet Nick, and played by Clark Gable, and I love this when we're introduced to a character by other people talking about this character before we see them, because he's got this horrible reputation, he's a brute, but when she encounters him, he strikes her, like cracks her chin open. That hit happens off screen, and the camera, like if I remember correctly, like we're watching them and the camera starts to like drift downwards as she like falls to the ground, so we see the after effects of it, but we don't see the actual punch. Later on, I think she punches him.
Yeah, because she's lifting, she's crouching down to pick something up, and as she's getting up, he hits her again. Oh, he hits her for the first time. So yeah, but yeah, go ahead.
But then later on, I think she decks him, and we get to see that. So it's like we don't, we didn't want to show an actual woman getting hit in the face. The other way around is fine. But I'm just saying, like, the Hays Code would not allow this kind of violence in the first place. But it feels like the people making this movie there was a line that they didn't want to cross, even though they probably could have, because there was no one policing it.
Well, it's William Wellman, who again, he was. We watched Safe in Hell, which he directed earlier this year. He was known as the king of the message picture. So there was always kind of a moral message behind everything that he did. At least in the pre-code days.
Well, but I'm saying this goes beyond just like the message picture. It's a message in the way that it's made, which I thought was very interesting. Like, we are not going to show a woman getting hit in the face. We'll show like she's got a bloody chin, but that we don't want to encourage that or something.
Maybe this is we don't want to encourage that. We don't want to feel like we're glorifying it in any way. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah. It was an interesting choice. I didn't mind it. I thought it was actually kind of it was a kind of a cool shot, because it pans down as she's confronting him, and all of a sudden you just hear the smack, and she drops down unconscious. You're like, oh damn.
It's almost I feel like it's far more impactful that we didn't see it, because it's almost like the director is like, this is so bad that the camera has to look away.
And this is the director of The Public Enemy, who made a very violent movie just a year prior that everyone was, and that could be also why, because he got a lot of negative attention for the violence at the end of The Public Enemy, which may be why a lot of the violence at the end of this movie happens off camera, and it's just kind of hinted to.
Yeah.
Either his choice or the studio was like, Wellman, because this would have been old studio system, so he would have been under contract most likely, and so they probably asked him, this one, could you maybe
tone it down a little bit,
do that elsewhere.
She also gets. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say. It was either she or no. I think it was Nurse Hart. She gets kind of like roughed up and accosted by the other drunk guy who was kind of on the scene too.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he gets very handsy with her, and it gets kind of scary. Which is, again, I kind of you. In our kind of private chat, Mark, you said you love this movie and you can't wait to talk about it. And I'm like, well, that makes one of us. I'm enjoying talking about it. And I think if I were to watch it again, knowing what kind of movie it ends up being, I won't be as thrown, because I was so turned off by the direction this goes, because it not only turns into like this weird drama / crime procedural, medical procedural, whatever you want to call it, but it's also so vicious and ugly in parts that I'm like, this is almost like a bait and switch here.
It is dark. It turned dark quick, and on one hand, I usually don't quite care for like that drastic of a tonal shift. I think it appealed to me here because it was so unexpected for a film because of the way it starts out. Like you said, this starts out. I'm like, oh, this is going to be like Maloney and Hart as they get through,
and their misadventures,
their misadventures as they run into the various bootleggers or other people that come in the emergency room, and we're gonna have Morty who becomes the love interest, and all that, and like, oh, this could be kind of light, and all of a sudden she takes the night nurse job, and then it's like, oh, these kids are malnourished and that. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then we're like, oh, and then we get into the drugs, and then we get into the abuse and almost attempted rape by the drunk guy. And you're just like,
and that's how we're introduced to Nick, because Nick initially, although the children are, and that's one thing about, Ian brought up people talking about the character before he comes in and talking about what a brute he is. When you hear children talking about how vicious a person is, that immediately gets you going somewhere. But you immediately, when you got that drunk who's getting a little handsy with her, we're introduced to Nick physically. Well, he knocks the guy out, I think, again off camera.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, where you're kind of, it's kind of a bait and switch even there, because you're introduced to him on camera. He's saving her from being raped, but then he's trying, obviously, to keep the widow drugged up and drunk as much as he can. And we discover later on what the plot was, and then that scene ends with him him decking Barbara Stanwyck, Laura Hart. So yeah, we kind of even get it even there, that kind of bait and switch of just within the scene itself, which is kind of interesting.
I want to see, because Mark, when you're talking about this kind of like a fun, fluffy, almost like sitcom setup, I immediately thought, in another universe, that movie exists, and Clark Gable is still in it, but he's like the sexy kind of buttoned up doctor that the nurse falls for, but then like the nerdy orderly is the guy that really loves her, like the Ducky Blaine situation. Yeah, that movie exists somewhere.
And I totally get the tonal shift being jarring for people, because it was a bit jarring for me. I'm like, oh, we're going here now, and then I had to kind of reset my brain a bit, but then that's part of the story intrigued me quite a bit, of how this is, where are they going with this, with the drunk mom, and the bootleggers there, and then how Morty doesn't actually show up as much as I thought he was going to when we got introduced to him in the emergency room when she helps with the bullet hole. I'm like, oh, he's gonna be, on camera, and he doesn't. He shows up at just the right moments, which I liked about his character. It just was a surprise.
Which she even says, you're not much of a looker, but you have a way of being at the right place at the right time. But throughout, when she's going through her schooling, you see, like the big flower thing that he sent to her graduation to my pal, because they don't know each other's names.
It's just my pal.
He sends her booze, right? And
he sends her booze. He sends her a big bouquet of flowers on the graduation day, and he does. When she meets up with him, he runs into him by chance in a pharmacy. He does say something about how well connected he is, and all I got to do is tell some people who hit you. All I got to do is tell some people I don't like the guy, and he's going to be taken care of. And that comes back in the end.
Yes, and one of the great, I don't know if that was the closing line, but it was pretty damn close. The fate of our friend Nick. I do want to say, I liked this setup of this movie, but I was also kind of turned off by it, not in an erotic sense, but just intellectually. Help me out here, guys. When Nurse Hart goes to the hospital and she's trying to get this internship and she's turned down, is it because she completed 3 years of high school? But she didn't graduate, or was it 3 years of? Okay,
no, because she didn't graduate high school,
right? And so the movie, I feel like, wants me to be sympathetic towards her, and she kind of like, but I can come in and just give me a chance. I'm like, no, you want to be a nurse in a city hospital. This is not like, and you didn't finish high school. This is not like, I could just mop floors. No, you're gonna be like drawing blood, and prescribing things potentially or handling pills. I'm like, no, this is not the case. And then so she leaves, she's dejected, and then she has her purse knocked over in the turning doors by the head doctor guy. And he like bends down, starts picking everything up, and she's just like standing there tapping her foot like all entitled and stuff. I'm like, he didn't mean to do it, lady. But he stands up and he's kind of like giving her the wink and nod. This is where I thought he was gonna like put the moves on her or something. But this whole like he shows an interest in her. The next scene, they're back up at the head nurse's office, and she's like, "Oh, why didn't you mention you knew Dr. such and such? Here, I'll give you this, internship. All my previous concerns about your lack of education and just wandering off the street. I don't know who the hell you are, lady. That's all out the window because you know my friend, the good doctor here."
Well, the good doctor.
What is this movie?
And also, what's in it for him?
But yeah.
I kept waiting for that shoe to drop. I'm like,
because okay, if he was gonna like you said, if he was gonna try to put the moves on her, then we'd see a reason. But he never even does that. It's just, I bumped into you, so I feel like I owe you a job.
Well,
because I accidentally knocked your purse out of your hands.
I feel like she thought maybe she owed him a job, but
I think there's in all honesty, I think there's some things sitting on the cutting room floor for this film. Not just your obvious, but I think there's chunks of this film that possibly were removed. I have a feeling she had a conversation with him or something happened that would have triggered him to cut to the hallway to them heading to the head nurse. Either she made a plea or something. I have a feeling because later on we have a kid who completely disappears from the movie. There's two girls in the bedroom and they're both supposedly sisters. And suddenly when one got really sick, the other one's like not even mentioned.
Yeah, they said they had to move her because Nanny is the little girl that got sick. Nanny is so sick that they had to move the other one away from her.
Oh, is that what they? Because I must.
There was a line of dialogue in there between the maid and I think Joan Blondell's character, and then Joan Blondell tells Barbara Stanwyck.
Oh, okay. I might have missed that.
But there's a little line of dialogue in there that says, "Yeah, we had to move her because she's so sick," which also is a strange plan because you're slowly malnourishing the kids, and you're moving one of them out. I mean, it's kind of going to be obvious what happened if the other one is all well. And she even tells Nick it's a stupid idea because, that kid's going to go away to a hospital and be okay and then be brought back and end up in the same position as this kid who you're slowly killing. So it really isn't a well thought out plan by these. It's obvious what you're doing.
I mean, next to
murder these children to get your hands on the trust that their wealthy father left behind.
It sounds like the plot that a chauffeur would hatch.
Yes.
But I mean, but briefly, you're talking about like missing dialogue or even missed motivations because, going back to the doctor, the head of the hospital, whatever, taking Nurse Hart back up to the head nurse's office and essentially getting her the internship. Where's his head at? Did she lie to him and say, "Oh, I'm fully credentialed. It just didn't work out for some reason," or did she say the whole story? Like, "Oh yeah, I was 1 semester away from, or 1 year away from finishing high school. 1 year away from finishing high school, and you want to come work in the hospital?" Sure. Like I don't know what kind of judge of character he was, but it's all very fuzzy. It is all very cutting room floor. To Mark's point.
He did also he did also say something about her name being Hart and how that somehow that was like a good omen to him.
Because that makes everything better. Yeah.
Well,
but that still is not enough.
The only thing I could think of though, and what's her name? The Nurse Cratchit or whatever, the head nurse, he vouches for Hart and even tells her, call the high school and find out if she was okay as a student. Well, then, let's take her in. The only thing I could think of as them kind of allowing it is the fact that she isn't becoming a complete nurse. It's basically training on the job. And she pretty much tells her, if you screw up pretty much at all, or, you're out on the street, and good luck trying to find another job like this. So even though, yeah, she may not have the education background or even gone to college, they are going to teach her. And so I think maybe between that and the fact of this guy vouching for her, the head nurse figured, oh, she's going to screw up anyway because she's, not that smart. So we'll just let her go then. And then we don't have to worry about it. That could be, I'm just saying that could be the approach.
Kill somebody.
I was just going to say that because like, I understand where you're coming from, Mark, but we might be applying way too much thought to a 1931 sort of screwball comedy / really dark drama. But you think about that, like screwing up could mean, oh, I forgot, I misfiled a piece of paperwork, or I put the wrong fluid in this guy and he exploded.
It could be. I mean, but we're also talking 1930 medicine. So who knows, the 1931 especially.
She applied a leech in the wrong way.
It sounded like it,
back to sucking, I guess. That's anyway how she got the internship. No, also help me out here. Were they using real skeletons back then, probably in the hospital?
I don't know.
Most likely back then.
Because that whole prank that Egan pulled where he put the skeleton in the bed, and she's so repulsed by it that she just has to go get into bed with Nurse Blondell. I'm like, you're a nurse. It's a prop skeleton from the hospital. It's not like he dug a fresh grave. What is up? What's wrong with you?
It's pre-code film. What are you talking about? You got you got an opportunity to get these two into bed together. What are you talking about?
I'm not complaining. I'm just saying.
Jarring to see a skeleton in your bed. But, yeah, you're right. I mean, she also screams and gives away that they were out partying all night.
Yeah.
But also, it takes Nurse Ratchet, as you like to call her, Mark, a long time to like get across to that room. Yeah, the scene happens and like all this other stuff happens, and then she finally goes in there.
Yeah, the guy Egan who put the skeleton in the bed shows up before the nurse does, which is why then Joan Blondell is throwing the slipper because she thinks it's him.
Yeah, and then I like that she gets 4 weeks of night duty. And then doesn't she say like "thank you, ma'am" or something like that? And
yeah,
and then 2 more weeks for impertinence. Awesome, love it.
Yeah, and the way she said it too. That's why I really liked Maloney's character, because she was, and we've seen it through the other pre-code films that we watched this year. We have seen the buddy, the two BFFs type of chemistry. I think Maloney is probably one of the best ones we've seen as the sidekick friend this year. Maybe one or two others. I'm trying to remember offhand.
We saw it with the redheaded woman.
The redheaded woman, yeah. The redheaded woman as well.
There were a couple others. But there was actually a running series around this time, because Hal Roach was constantly doing these little team ups. Like they had Laurel and Hardy, but there was also a series that's come to be known as the Girlfriends series, where it was Thelma Todd first with Zazu Pitts, and there was a lot of tension there as to whether or not anything was going on between them, because and then there was Zazu Pitts went on to start doing features. Thelma Todd stayed, and they brought in Patsy Kelly, who was an open lesbian. There were situations where, like this, they'd end up in bed together, or end up having to strip down together. Or at one point, and I remember this one vividly, Thelma Todd is taking a phone call. She has her back to Patsy Kelly, who's walking in carrying a trunk, who looks her over and goes, "Toots, you look scrumptious." I was like, hello, 1932, 1932 lesbian overtones. But it was becoming kind of commonplace in a lot of to do the kind of girl best friend things, but to also kind of bring a little bit of sexiness to it. Mm-hmm. Like there was one where Patsy Kelly and Thelma Todd were supposed to be like showing appliances in a store window, and the appliances all start going off and everything, and and it sets off like smoke alarms, and water starts shooting out. So they have to get out of their wet clothes, and people are watching from the street. So I mean, it was becoming kind of like that in the pre-code stuff. So this was probably playing up on that a little bit. And honestly, the first time I saw this movie, that's where I thought it was going to go. I thought it was going to be like a raunchy comedy, like almost like a police academy, like a nurse academy, you know?
Nurse Academy. That has to be a movie somewhere.
I'm sure
right?
that's a movie.
There were so many police academy ripoffs in the 80s. There must have been.
If I could make a time machine, I'd travel back to 1931 and make my own sexy nurse show called Scissors in the Bed.
Oh God.
Yeah. Who left my scissors? Sorry, what? Back to the show.
Back to the show. But yeah, I mean, I did like the dynamic, and I liked the fact that we didn't get like a sudden rivalry between our two BFFs. They stayed friends throughout this whole film. We didn't get like something that happened to where suddenly one's not talking to the other anymore. You know, and the lesbian overtones are there because you know, Maloney talks about guys like, you know, what you want is an appendicitis. You want to make him feel like you saved his life, and then you'll get paid more.
Yeah, then you find yourself a husband that way. It's kind of the implication that I got. You find yourself, you know, the rich guys all get appendicitis.
Yeah, it is kind of a shame, like, that we didn't get to see the second half of the first half of the movie that we were promised. I mean, overall, I'm starting to warm to this picture talking to you guys, but yeah, I'd like to see the second half of the romantic screwball comedy and the first half of the dark human drama just as separate movies and just watch them both.
It does kind of feel like we are getting two movies in 67 minutes or 69 minutes or whatever it is.
I prefer the second number given the subject matter.
Yeah, you do get two different movies. It is.
I mean, it's also like Clark Gable. That was the big thing, like, because I cannot think off the top of my head another time where I've seen him play a villain.
He was a gangster in, or no, am I thinking of Cary Grant? No, it was Clark Gable, wasn't it?
Oh, what movie are you thinking of?
One we talked about within the last few months. It was like a gangster picture.
Man, if we watched that many movies.
It was a minor part. I'm sorry, I'm very tired. I can picture it. It was a minor
I know you're.
Oh wait, are you talking about the Marlene Dietrich movie?
Yes.
That was Cary Grant.
Was it Cary Grant? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's right, because I talked about North by Northwest shortly after that. Okay, so it wasn't Clark Gable.
Yeah, it was Cary Grant showing up as this kind of blowhard character in the pre-code Marlene Dietrich movie, Blonde Venus.
Blonde Venus.
Yes.
Yeah.
In my defense, they both have the same initials.
They do.
Sorry.
They do both have the same initials. So.
And they were both two of the, very considered sexy men of their time. So
yeah.
But I don't think I've ever seen Clark Gable as a villain, aside from this movie. I mean, I might have, and I just forgot, but I feel like I haven't.
No,
he's a rogue in Gone with the Wind.
Yeah.
There's a case to be made there.
Yeah, I mean, it is, but still not like this. Not like
women abuse children.
Not like woman abusing, child killing chauffeur who's dressed in black. In case you didn't get that, he is the villain. He's constantly dressed in black.
He wears the hell out of that chauffeur's uniform. That was great.
He looked intimidating. He's just tall and he's just standing, chest puffed out, arms behind him. Like, no, dude, I will fuck you up. Try me.
And this is something that I think is only because of the context of him as a pop cultural icon, especially from Gone with the Wind. Like, to see him clean shaven, like none of that, mustache. It's just so off-putting and so weird. Like, something doesn't look right about him. In addition to his reputation, in addition to the striking, figure he cuts. Just something's. He's mean. There's something. He's a nasty piece of work in this movie.
He is. I mean, he gets all in. He's Nick is a scary character in general. That's what I dug his character. I dug the two halves of these movies. They don't necessarily go together, but I dug the two halves of these movies because yeah, he's actually legitimately scary on screen when you finally meet him, and you're like, I totally forgot it was Clark Gable till I looked up the credits afterwards. I'm like, oh wait, shit, that is Clark Gable. Apparently, he had played like bad guys in the mid 20s when he was first starting out occasionally, but this according to some trivia is the last bad guy role, like official, like actual bad guy role for him was this film.
It wasn't too long after this that he was in It Happened One Night, and that was that's probably the movie that like really skyrocketed him.
Yeah, well, they played to his good looks. So,
definitely, yeah, he was a very good-looking guy.
Yeah, apparently James Cagney was initially supposed to play him, but Cagney was so big after Public Enemy, they decided to cast Clark Gable, who at the time was a relatively unknown.
I mean, Cagney also would have been a little on the nose because everything about him was like almost everything he was in. He was a gangster. Of course, he was also a great song and dance guy, but I guess he was the Christopher Walken of his time in that way. Because Christopher Walken is like this great song and dance guy, but he's always known for playing like these weirdo gangsters and things. But I feel like that might have been too on the nose to have Cagney do it.
Another interesting.
Cagney's short. Clark Gable's tall.
Yeah, Cagney is not. Yeah, he would. Cagney is not who you want as Nick when as they build him up. You want Clark Gable. When he shows in the room, you're like, oh, I see why the kids are scared of him. I see why the housekeeper's scared of him, and everybody else is scared of him. Okay.
They could go the other way though. If he's a smaller guy, kind of like, weird but not outwardly intimidating, but he has this crazy reputation, then you're just wondering, like, when is the big reveal going to happen? When are we going to find out why everybody's afraid of this guy? Because when Nick shows up, you're like, oh, I get it. The rumors are all true. I don't need any more information.
Another interesting twist for our dark tone of this film. Apparently, an early draft of the script, intern Egan places the skeleton in a baby carriage, not Laura's bed. The startled Laura drops the baby she is holding with tragic results. Egan admits his guilt and is fired from the hospital, but they changed the sequence.
So Stanwyck accidentally kill a baby in the beginning of the movie.
And this is still in the comedy section of the film.
This is before the film gets dark. Wow.
Wow. Oh man. I mean, it's crazy. The other things in this film, when we got Morty, who was our lovable bootlegger,
our lovable murderous gangster.
Our lovable murderous. He is charismatic. Come on.
Yeah, he's great. It's like if you didn't know what he did for a living, you'd be like, "Oh, this guy's wonderful. He probably works at a shoe store or something."
He asked her if she wanted a soda with him, and I'm like, "Yes, I want a soda with this guy. I want to sit down with this guy. This guy's cool, And it's like in the back of my head, yeah, I know he's probably done a lot of bad shit, but up front, he's a cool guy. So let's have a soda.
He comes off like the guy who talks a big game. Because he's like, oh, yeah, all I got to do is tell some people I don't like a guy, and he disappears. Yeah. And anybody who talks like that is never going to actually be a threat. Because the guys who make somebody disappear, they don't talk like that.
Yeah.
They don't get broadcasting it.
It's funny because I could see an alternate, like just a slight sidestep in the story, where it turns out he is the chauffeur for whatever mafia outfit he's working for. So it's like the rival chauffeurs. I don't know.
One of the things too is when he's kind of warming up to Barbara Stanwyck, they talk about how the job's almost not worth $56 a week, which we have to do this. It's our last of the year.
Gotta.
$56 a week in 1931 means that they're getting paid in 2024 equivalency of $1,000, $1,100 a week
while they're learning,
while they're
the
learning.
craft.
So it was the equivalent of 1162. So that you can see why they stuck through it. One of the things that I did love about the early part of this film was the scene in the ER on how streetwise pretty much everybody is. It's like they know, and again, Hays Code, bringing it around to our pre-code theme. I think this is a perfect film to end on it because in like this first half hour, we hit all the boxes that they talk about the Hays Code wanting to ban. You had the women in underwear, right? You had an unflattering portrayal of the police in that scene where the nurses are working on this bootlegger, this guy who's a gangster, and they have more sympathy for him because they're looking at the injury on his head and they're like, did he get hit anywhere else? And they look at the cop and the cop looks at them rather indignant, goes, no. And they both roll their eyes like, yeah, okay, sure.
And you mentioning the whole thing with the accidental baby killing with Barbara. Yeah. I'm wondering if the reason this feels kind of disjointed the way it does is maybe there was like more of like a buildup to the darkness, like it slowly got darker as it went, instead of just like all at once, like what we got here. Because maybe it was just going to get, it was just further and further a descent into hell versus just right into it.
Well, this is something that I'm glad you brought this up, Joe, because I was thinking about it. Maybe and I'm not sure of the sequence of events here, so maybe you guys can help me out. There's that really great scene. It's very heavy. It's not dark in the way the movie gets dark, but it's definitely heavy when the two nurses are assisting our head doctor here on an operation in the OR, and it's like got that thing where all the other people in the hospital are watching this go on, and the doctor loses the patient on the table, and it's our nurse Hart is visibly shaken, and Maloney is grabbing her hand in support. It's very touching. But then afterwards, the doctor, he kind of leaves with his head kind of hung low, and then Hart is left alone in the ER, and she faints. Now, I thought it kind of weird because this is the part where in a comedy-ish type of setting, I can understand a little bit of heaviness to it, but this was really heavy. And there was no follow-up to her fainting. I would have expected some kind of a remark about I would expect Egan to say something, the next day, but it's never brought up again. But I'm wondering if this is sort of our descent into the heavier material as it changes movies in the middle.
Well, it is. I mean, because this was right after the scene where she's given the bottle of booze,
right?
Because Maloney says because
they were getting ready to go into the ER, right?
Yeah. What? And the one other nurse that's in there with them goes, "What use is this to you? You're not allowed to drink." They're like, "Oh, we'll use it to clean our teeth." And then immediately after they lose the patient, Maloney, after she comforts her, goes, "Yeah, I think I need to go clean my teeth."
Yeah.
So
yes. And that's funny that you mentioned that, because the first instance of that line is a joke, and the second is sort of like kind of coping humor.
Yeah,
it's not funny, but it is a callback to a joke, which that's another thing that I love when movies can pull that off. And thank you for reminding me that, because that's great. But then we get Hart fainting, and it's not brought up again, but this is like where the movie really starts to take a turn. I think it's a much more deft turn than, hey, we're just going to drop a baby.
Well, and then you get the scene where they're giving their oath, and Maloney is chewing her gum through half of it, to the part where they say, "Yes, I will be, chaste and all this," and she's just like, yeah, and, yes, I'll be at my best behavior.
Yeah.
No, I think going into this film, the way it starts and then where it starts to turn can be jarring, but it's one of those where I'd almost want to watch it again to see if there's anything in the beginning that might hint that it's gonna, head a little darker a little sooner. Because I enjoyed both stories, just putting them together. It's just like, wow.
Maybe like you said, maybe there's something on the cutting room floor. There is something to kind of bridge them in a way, but it's gone for some reason. I don't know.
It's hard to say, but you can, watching this film, and that's why I'm glad we're ending our series with this. You watch this film and it is exactly what checks off so many boxes of why the Hays Code came about for some people. I mean, we don't have necessarily problems today, but you can see it. One of the things, and I want to touch on it before we close out tonight, because I thought it was very interesting. The film is still a bit topical for relevant today for how how everybody that Hart tries to go to once she figures out pretty quickly what's going on with the kids, everybody warns her, yeah, who's going to believe you? You're just they don't quite say it, but they're like, you're just a hysterical woman. And it comes up a number of times like, wow. I'm like sitting here going, I'm like, that's a little bit relevant today. You still hear,
They also brought up this a lot in those conversations. Are they going to believe this tenured doctor or you, a nurse who's on her first case? You're on your 1st case. This is only your first case. They did put that out there a little bit. I think a lot of it is still, you're just a hysterical woman, but I think a lot of it is also you're not someone who's more. I mean, even if it had been the nurse who gave her the job,
right?
Versus a doctor who's well known, it probably still would have been like, nah, she doesn't know what she's talking about. She's only a nurse. But yeah, this must have been before like we had like an entire like apparatus to go through to like report this kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean the hysterical woman thing felt very much of its time, but a smarter, I think, approach to the screenplay would have been, well, who is going to believe? Who are people going to believe? This tenured doctor or the lady who weaseled and lied her way into the hospital?
And that could have been brought up too.
Deceit.
Yeah. That wasn't brought up as much. It was only brought up once by not a snuff sniffer, but the good doctor Hill, not the other guy who had the twitch. I loved how he continually had the twitch too. Like he does a lot of this shit because he's got a tick. But it is brought up by the older doctor about her tenure versus this other pristine doctor, and even him. He's like, this doctor has high standing. Even if I go to him, he goes, they're not going to believe me if he says no.
Yeah, because he's more successful than me. They're going to think it's just me being jealous because he has a more successful practice than me. Yeah.
So I mean, it's just interesting to watch a film this old and you watch these topics and stuff come up and you're like, wow, okay, people were addressing things like this 100 years, 90 years ago.
And a lot of these things have not changed. Some of them have, like we do have, like I said, the apparatus in place.
Yeah. But still the believing a veteran versus, that's still an uphill battle.
I mean, rightly so. I mean, because in the last 10 years, we've had, Me Too was its own thing, but things got a little bit out of control. I mean, as we saw with the recent, the whole Duke lacrosse case that destroyed several lives, and it turns out it was all a complete fabrication for clout. I'm not saying that's every case, certainly, but there have been more cases to balance that out, and unfortunately, create more harm again to that whole idea of like, well, you got to watch out who you believe. I think you should in principle, but it's a lot easier to write people off now because of those handfuls of examples. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, it very much is. because the false cases really overshadow and the legit cases or make it even tougher.
Yeah.
And
Thank you for saying thank you for articulating what I was unable to do, Mark.
And that's what at the core is of those and they always say, you know, and I've had that in professional careers too. They say you can have all the accolades you want. It takes one mistake for people to forget all of that. And it's unfortunate, but it's true. So one apple that's a fake report, or one apple that sheds a negative light or proves to be false, is something that can be used as a tool to go, well, this happened. So, you know,
But also,
and it's bad. It's unfortunate.
But also
yeah.
on the other hand, you got, you know, the Brock Turner case where the kid's father kind of argued what we're arguing here. But he said, you know, my kid did all these great things. It's a shame that his life should be ruined by 20 seconds, by something he did for 20 seconds or whatever the line was. And I'm like, well, it took him 20 seconds to sexually assault somebody. So that is kind of a big deal. Or to attempt.
And also that's a really bad way to defend your son.
Yeah.
20 seconds.
I mean, you could murder somebody in under 20 seconds. So
Yeah.
should those 20 seconds,
I'm just saying.
It's not a way. That's not a way.
If I were to make that case, and I wouldn't, I'd be like, it's a shame someone's life would have to be ruined by 3.5 hours. Am I right? Of a mistake.
Yeah. No, it's. But you know, this conversation, I mean, it's heavier than where I expected, but I'm glad it did, because it shows that these classic movies, and we'll wrap it up here. These classic movies, please don't sign off on them, because even ones that might not exactly be the bestly structured, because especially back then, they're still figuring this stuff out.
This is very early in the talkies. So yeah
they're figured, but they cover topics, and this isn't the first film we've talked about that was a pre-code film that covered topics that are still in discussion today. They cover relevant topics even back then. They present them in a different way because it was a different world, but at the same time, at their core, there's similar themes, similar discussions, similar characters that we see that make these early films worth watching. Because for Night Nurse, we'll get final thoughts here. For me, my Night Nurse, even for as jarring as the tone is, I got into the story just because I found it interesting. Because when we get into the kid part, I'm like, where the fuck are we going with this?
Yeah, because it's literally just right in the middle of the movie. Joan Blondell's Maloney character mentions it. Goes, oh, hey, by the way, these kids seem really malnourished. Like, we're half an hour into this 60-minute movie when she says that. And there's no indication earlier of this. It just happens. And then it just turns into, oh, this story is now about murdering children.
It is. It's just like the trailer, the teaser trailer for Wes Craven's Red Eye. You think you're watching a meet cute between Cillian Murphy and Rachel McAdams, and all of a sudden you do that one like shot of his eye turning askance, and you're like, oh, this is a horror movie. Okay.
So for me, that's why I appreciate it. Ian, what about you? I know you said you didn't quite care for it.
I've warmed up to it in this conversation. I think the next time I watch it, and there will be a next time, knowing what I'm in for, it'll probably still be a bit rocky, but I think I'll be able to appreciate it on a level that I can't quite right now.
Sure.
This is the first time I've seen Barbara Stanwyck in anything. I think I know the name.
Double Indemnity, or
no,
you haven't seen Double Indemnity?
I've not. That was a Wilder film, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a blind spot. I gotta fix.
That's probably the best known movie of hers.
Yeah.
Okay. But something you said, Mark, about like not writing these movies off, I think there could be a cool challenge. Like, find someone who refuses to watch movies from the 30s and give like a synopsis of one of the films we've talked about and the roughest scene, and just say, okay, instead of like, would you watch a movie from the 30s? Say, would you watch a movie about, this nurse who infiltrates this plot to like kill children, and she gets punched out by the evil chauffeur who ends up being killed by the mob. You're like, oh my God, what was this movie? It came out in 1931.
Yeah, we never even talked about that ending.
Yeah, the ending is hilarious.
Right.
Especially them reusing a shot, a gimmick.
Because Morty comes back. He comes to the house. He basically with his gun, with his hand in his pocket, signals he's got a gun. Gets Nick to leave, and then the next day, after he and Laura leave,
yeah,
Joan Blondell shows up. She takes over for the shift, and he says something about, oh, yeah, we're not going to have to worry about him anymore. And it cuts to an ambulance coming around the corner, repeating the opening shot of the film as it pulls up to the hospital. And the two guys who took out the body, the patient at the beginning, because that guy was still alive, goes, oh, no, this one's for the morgue. Oh, what was it? Another bootlegger? No, this guy was a chauffeur, or was dressed like a chauffeur.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And holy shit, yeah, this guy just had him killed.
Yeah, and we go back to the kind of wacky screwball ending, like da 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 da.
Yeah, they're just in the car, like, oh, hey, everything's great. We're gonna go off and enjoy our romantic life together.
This you mentioned, Joe. This is kind of a cult film. I wonder if the Zucker brothers were fans of this, because I'm reminded of like the Police Squad opening of the car going around the city. We get that bookend of the ambulance, and it's such a striking. We didn't talk about this, but it's such a striking opening to the film that like we are in the ambulance, like racing towards the hospital. It doesn't have anything really to do with anything else, but it's a lot of fun.
Not only do you get the shot within the ambulance as it's going through to the hospital, then we cut to the outside as they take the patient out, and we kind of follow into the ER, and we see the ER in the setting of that. It's like I'm watching this tracking shot, and it's a heavy freaking camera on this big ass down. They track this shot as this guy comes into the ER. They move up the camera as he's moving into his bay, and I'm like, that's a cool shot. I didn't expect to see that.
That's the theme of this entire year. I didn't expect to see that.
Yeah.
Like I'm constantly surprised month after month by the filmmaking, by the subject matter, by the acting in all these, almost 100-year-old movies that I would put up against most stuff that is coming out today.
Yeah. Agreed. Definitely agreed. So there you have it, folks. Night Nurse, 1931. Hope it intrigued you to see it, because it should still be experienced just for everything that goes on. Man, these older films, they knew they had only a specific runtime, and they stuck to it. And holy crap, do they pack a lot of story. Now, speaking of packing, Over the Hill month theme is coming up. And before we pack it up tonight, we're going to choose what our first theme of January 2025 will be, and what film from 1975 will be covered. Because next year, folks, if you didn't hear, is our Over the Hill special month, where each month we will be looking at a film from 1975. And why? Because I turned 50 in July. So I figured, why not look at other films that turned 50? So that's what we are going to be looking at. So we have a wheel of random, folks. Yes, we do. Let's see if we can get it here. So here
that's a great picture.
We have the wheel of random, and this time it's a little different. It is not the film names. It is the theme for the month that we are going to spin and see. So you will get to see the theme of the month, and then I'll let you know which movie influenced that.
Is it Carradine Carnage on there?
Yes, Carradine Carnage. So we're gonna spin the wheel.
I'll be here for all those. I love the Carradine.
And let's see what January 2025 is going to be. Interesting. We are going to be horrifically musical on January. So January 25 is going to be horrifically musical. And why I picked horrifically musical, because that's the Rocky Horror Picture Show. So that is the the over the hill movie we will cover, and to give you a little tease of what other films we will be talking about during Horrifically Musical Month. It will be Cannibal the Musical from 1993, Little Shop of Horrors from 1984, and Anna and the Apocalypse from 2017. So horror musical. No, Repo the Genetic Opera is not in there. Maybe one day I'll talk about that film, but probably sorry, Dawn. Sorry, I just I've tried with the movie. It's I appreciate it, but at the same time, yeah. So those are the movies we will be talking about. We're talking about horror musicals in January. So that is the Wheel of Random. It has decided. So that is what we're going to go with.
I'm excited, Mark, because this has been my excuse to actually make it all the way through the Rocky Horror Picture Show. It's never happened. And I've tried, I think, four times in my life. I always get hung up, like when Meatloaf enters the picture.
My, a wild and an untamed thing. I'm a bee with a deadly sting.
That's where I tuned out too. It was always when Meatloaf came in.
So
there's something about that moment where I was like, okay, this is too much.
It'll be an interesting discussion then. But I tried to pick some very interesting horror musicals, and I think that should be an interesting slate. So tune in for that, folks. But now, before you tune into that, I'm going to give the floor to my wonderful crew members so they get the license to shill. So, Ian, you're first tonight. What do you got to shill for us, sir?
Well, thank you. I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com and also right here on YouTube. I do interviews and roundtable reviews and just regular old movie reviews. So check us out. And I'm also here every Monday night talking about movies with Mark. Not talking about movies with Mark, but talking about movies with Mark. And oftentimes, one of the highlights of my year, talking about movies with Mark and Joe. So thank you.
Well, we appreciate it quite a bit. Always pleasure to have you. We're coming up on 5 years. You've been a regular here in the spoiler room. The check will be in the mail, by the way. So just to let you know. Joe, you got anything to plug? The residuals, yeah. You got anything to plug, Joe?
Right now, nothing to plug, but
sure.
I'll be back for a good chunk of these next year. You know, whenever I can. I didn't miss that many this year, so I'm kind of happy about that. Literary License is still on hiatus, so the last drive-in, I actually showed Mark what my next assignment is, but I can't talk about it until because they like to keep those a secret. But.
Yes, they do. Thank you both for making this a wonderful year with the pre-code films. I'm looking forward to these 50-year-old movies to talk about. And in case anyone's wondering what was missing from the wheel, the Jaws month, that's July. I'm reserving it for July for very specific reasons, which we'll find out in July. So you'll have to subscribe, like, and all that here onto YouTube. Like and subscribe and all that for Mr. Ian Simmons. Check out Literary License Podcast. Even if it's on hiatus, there's so much wonderful episodes there. Mr. Joe Randazzo, both of you, thank you so much for making this a lot of fun. But no rest for the wicked. We have an episode next week. Yes, we do. But it's not a nurse episode. We're done. We're going to talk about our best or faves, whatever, we're playing it loose, of 2024. It'll be either movies we watched for the show or movies we watched over the year or both. Hard to say. We're going to have possibly a variety of crew members. We're just playing it fun for the last episode of the year before we start kicking it in a high gear with our horror musical. So thank you, everyone who has tuned in. Hope you still tune in next week. And until then, we'll just say good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.